Great. Welcome, everybody. I'm Linda Conway, Executive Director for New England Newspaper and Press Association. Thanks so much for joining us today for our special webinar, Unlock the Power of State Education Data. Today, our presenters are from the Massachusetts Education to Career, or E2C Research and Data Hub. They bring together data and research about how children and students progress from early care and education settings through their K-12 education and into higher education and the workforce. The Hub makes data and research easier to find, use, and understand. Their new website and data tools are an accessible resource for journalists as you're looking up numbers and trends for the communities and school districts that you serve. Today, they're going to present an introduction to finding and working with the data, creating charts and visualizations and/or more specific school finance data that will be helpful to you in covering your communities. The Hub has multi-year data on enrollment, staffing, attendance, assessments, college and career pathways, post-secondary outcomes, and they're adding new data sets, dashboards, and data stories all the time. Today, I want to introduce Sam Ribnick. He is the executive director. Sam has over 10 years of experience as a consultant working with school districts and state agencies on effective data use. As senior director at District Management Council, Sam's trained district leaders and boards on using data to evaluate the return on investment of programs. He previously taught physics in Boston Public Schools and worked at the Boston Consulting Group. We also have Danielle Kane, who is the outreach and engagement specialist. And Danielle has extensive communications experience with educational and cultural nonprofit institutions. At the College of Holy Cross, she built audience engagement for interdisciplinary campus conversations and scholarly initiatives. Previously, she focused on family outreach as communications manager for the Worcester Art Museum and Ecotarium. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sam and Danielle. A couple of, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. A couple of housekeeping notes. If you could keep yourself muted during the presentation, unless you're speaking. We really want to encourage everybody to participate. So pop in with questions as you have them. The more interactive these sessions are, the better they are for everybody. So if you have any questions at any time, please just jump right in.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Yeah, we're really happy to be here and excited to share with you all some of the ways that you can use data from the Education to Career Research and Data Hub. This is a fairly new project, but it builds on long-running work by the state of Massachusetts and the Department of Education there to make data very accessible and transparent for people to use. So many of you may have already experienced using data from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education or Department of Higher Education in your reporting. I think, though, what you'll find is the new tools that we're making available here hopefully make it easier to find what you're looking for, and especially for those of you who want to do some analytics on your own, should make the data easier to work with as well. So really excited to be sharing this with all of you. And I do see that it's a fairly small group, so I'm happy to keep this very informal. Our aim is to make this a useful conversation for all of you. So in just a minute, we'll do a little overview, but then I'll probably ask people to introduce themselves and say a little bit about what they want to be able to do with data. And so then we can make sure that we're really tailoring this hour that we have together to make it as useful as possible for you. So just to start us off, we're going to be talking about what do we mean when we say longitudinal data, and what kinds of education data do we have available? How might you use data in your reporting? Probably many of you have good ideas and suggestions on that. We'll dive into some specific dashboards and data sets that you might find useful. And if people have questions about something that they've been looking for, we can try to point you to the most relevant dashboards or data sets that are already out there. And then we'll also do a little hands-on where, depending on kind of the level and the interest of the group, I can also demonstrate some of the steps about how you would actually use this data for analytics, and we can see what people's interest is there. I'll also note that while Danielle and I both are working on this project in Massachusetts, and the bulk of what we're going to be talking about is from Massachusetts, we're so sometimes in touch with colleagues in other states and aware of the similar equivalent projects in other states. Danielle has pulled together those as references. We'll point those out later in the slides for those of you who are interested in getting data from other New England states. Each state's site is a little bit different, but I think the overall ideas will be the same. So here in Massachusetts, when we talk about longitudinal data, this is about the ability to follow children as they go from early childhood, where they might get services like home visiting services to the parents when the child is very young. They might get social benefit services. As they get older, they might take part in pre-K or other subsidized daycare programs, then move into the K-12 schooling system. So if they're in public schools, we have a lot of data as they follow through K-12 and then into higher ed in the workforce. And this is a pretty large constellation of different data sets. And each one of them is sort of owned and governed by a different agency or combination of agencies. You can see some of those labels here. There's a real alphabet soup on this page if it's not stuff that you're familiar with. And part of the goal of the Education to Career project is to make it so that you all don't have to keep track of exactly which data is on which agency's website and where do you go to find a certain thing. That if we have these things connected and available, we want to make it so that it's easy to find through a single front door for data. I would say right now, we're part of the way there. I think almost everything education related can be found right now through the Data Hub. And we're starting to bring in more of the workforce side of things. Some of these connections out to like health and human services over here, housing, these are still a bit more distant for us. You won't find those through the Data Hub right now. But I think, we want to make it as easy as possible for people to find what they're looking for. And so what you will find in the Data Hub is you'll find K-12 data, public preschool data, early college, higher ed, national college data for people who go out of state and out of region. And we have some information about workforce as well. So I think that can cover a wide range of reporting topics and policy topics that hopefully this can be helpful to bring data to. When we talk about research, that's also a part of it, because one of the reasons that the state invests in maintaining all of these data systems is because that allows academic researchers to try to sort through, what sort of efforts and initiatives are really making a difference for students, and to be able to see for a given policy topic, what is the best practice that's really working. And so that's part of the project as well, that when there are research findings coming out with Massachusetts data, we try to highlight those, put them in context along with the Massachusetts data, so that way people are getting that full picture. And we'll talk about some of the ways that we do that. The Education to Career Hub is really intended for a wide range of audiences. So you can see many of the folks that we keep in mind as we're designing the tools and trying to make this data easy to use. What's not on here is journalists, but I think that this is going to be a tool that's hopefully very helpful for all of you. We'd welcome your feedback if there's things that you wish that you were seeing. And a big part of increasing the access to this data, I think, immediately makes it easier for you all to be able to work with it. So this is where we're going to open it up for all of you. And because it's a small group, I think it would be great for people to just come off camera and say a quick hello. If you're eating, if you can't do that, I know this is a lunch webinar, that's fine too. But I'll just call people in the order that I see them on here. And if you could just share, who you are, where you work, and then what kind of data are you interested in, and what do you like to do with data? So I see Michael came on camera first, so I'll call on you. Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, yeah, so I'm actually editor at the Worcester Telegram. We're in between education reporters right now, so normally I would have suggested that my education reporter attend this, but I wanted to, I figured I'd jump in on it myself. So sorry, I don't have a more specific ask than that.
No, that's all right. But can you tell a little bit about, do you work with data in your reporting at all?
Well, like I said, I supervise the news staff, so we're looking for those types of opportunities, but I'm not actually reporting myself. Yeah.
Great. I'll go to Chris and then John.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Chris Larrabee. I'm with the Greenfield Recorder out in Western Mass. And I would say a lot of the things I've been looking at over the last couple of years is financial data related to schools, specifically rural school aid. I'm sure, you guys know if you're following statewide trends, there's a big push for rural school aid out here. So, it's kind of what we've been following.
Thanks, Chris. John?
Hi, I'm John Muldoon. I'm with the Ipswich Local News. I'm just here to find out how the tool works and see how it may be of use in future.
Great. I'll go next to actually my colleague here, Jackie Reese. You want to say a quick hello?
Sure. It's good to see you all here. So I am the communications director here at DESE. So if you're a reporter, you'll be coming to me if you have questions. It's good to see you all here. And before I had this job, I was an education reporter at the Telegram and Gazette. So Michael, I hope you find a new one very quickly.
Thank you.
And then Erica, it looks like we got two people with you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Erica Brown. I'm up near John Muldoon. I'm on the North Shore, Boston. I'm in Cape Ann with the Manchester Cricket. I'm the editor of Manchester Cricket. And this is Dasada Sadiku, who is an intern and is working, she's in a program right now with Boston College's Center for Investigative Journalism, and she's spending time with us and she's taking over sort of the data first part of this. So that's going to be pretty much her job for the next couple of weeks. And we are very much interested in being able to have a data tool that can provide contextual information for our local regional school district.
Great. Well, thanks, everyone. I think we got everyone there. So that's really helpful to know. And yeah, as I said, we'll try to tailor this as we go. Feel free to jump in with questions, and I'll keep an eye on the chat as well. So if that's easier for you, you can do that. So what I'll talk about here is there's a lot of different ways that you can work with state data. And I think I will probably take the time to highlight a few of these and even bring them up so that you can see. So one of the ones that people might already be most likely to be familiar with is what's called the DESE School and District Profiles. So this is a tool that allows you to really look closely at any one particular district or school or regional district, charters as well. And it lets you really see virtually every data point that we have on that district. So I'll pull that up in a minute. I think that's a good one to know about. We also have a tool that we call DART. That's an acronym. I think it stands for District Action Reporting Tools. And our district analysis and reporting tools. So that is something that lets you do easy comparisons between your district and school and others. And there's a few different DART tools that I think people might find useful. It's a very quick way. If you have a particular thing in mind that you just want to make a chart and get it into a story, DART might be a good way to do that. The DESE report cards, these take the data and really, really simplify it for people. These are intended more for like a parent or caregiver audience. So somebody who isn't necessarily like trying to look at data for analysis or for reporting, but you might find that helpful because it's really sort of boiled down to its simplest way that we can present the data. And then on the right, I'm going to talk about some of these new things that we have. So one of the things that people would commonly tell us was a difficulty about working with profiles, which has historically been the most complete source of data on schools, is that if you wanted to compare different groups of students or compare across years, that you often had to do a lot of like clicking back and forth on the screen and jotting down numbers because you had to first look at this group, then that group, then this year, then that year. So you'd have to be jotting down a bunch of numbers or maybe exporting a bunch of different Excel spreadsheets. So one thing that we've done is we've now in our data hub made the full data set behind these profiles reports available. So that means that with one data set, you can easily look at long-term trends over many years. You can compare different student groups. You can compare different schools or districts. So this is a very powerful way to access the data, but I will say that this is going to be for somebody who wants to do some analysis on their own, and I'll show some of how that works. And then what you also have is this same data hub tool has ways that you can build your own charts And I think this has both some advantages and disadvantages. It's nice that it's right there in the tool. It takes care of the formatting for you. And it's fairly easy to use. You can just sort of click around and change the things. On the other hand, it's not as powerful as if you were working in Excel, where you might be used to working, or if anybody else has a favorite tool, maybe Tableau or something, where they're used to doing their visualizations. This is not going to allow you as much fine-tuning and analysis as you can do in those. But we like that it's available to you just right there in the same interface. So while you're looking at the data, you can also quickly create a chart on the fly. So I will take the time to show how to use some of these. There's a couple other things that I want to highlight for folks first. Before I move on, any questions on what I'm sharing here, or anything that you're particularly interested to learn more about? All right, well, I'll share a couple other things, and then we'll come back to this. So how might you use data in reporting? So our team creates something that we call data stories, which are intended to be a combination of like narrative to help people really like get an understanding and connect in more of a personal way, talking about some of the policy context, and including data so that people really have a grounding in the facts of the situation. Some of the ways that you might want to do that is, and these are examples from our data stories. So we try to reference specific numbers that you can pull out of these tools that we talked about. So here, you can see like 34.5% of Hispanic and Latino students have the highest rate of chronic absence. So that's an example where we use a data point to support something that we're saying. We also sometimes will build charts like this that you see here. And so I'll show you some of the ways that you can use data to do that. And then the nice thing is that you can also create tables that you could display. And there's ways that you can do that using this tool or by exporting the data and doing it yourself. So there's a wide range of things you can do. And like I mentioned early on, there's really a huge amount of data that are available. Sometimes I think the hardest thing is actually knowing what you want to look for and knowing where to find it. But there's, whether you're looking for finance or enrollment or outcomes, workforce, college going, all of those things are available, and we'll try to show you how to use some of those. So here's one example of how we've done a data story just recently on chronic absenteeism. This is a topic that you might see a lot in the news, and we felt that there tend to be a lot of articles written about this, sometimes in like national media. Sometimes there's data in them. Sometimes it's more of like a, narrative story. And we thought it was really important that when people are thinking about chronic absenteeism here in Massachusetts, that they have some of the grounding in what do the patterns look like and what do we know about what's happening in Massachusetts. And so we led off with this chart, which I'll give you a minute, just take a look at and sort of see what takeaways you have from looking at this data on absence from school. Anybody want to call out what do they see? What's noteworthy here? Yeah, Chris?
I find the pre-K number jumping up, what is that, like 15-ish% or so?
Mm-hmm.
I find that pretty shocking, especially, well, like John just said, it hasn't reverted to pre-COVID, but, these are young kids that, it's up to the parents, a kid in grade 12 or, even they have access to a car, they don't have to go to school. It has to be a parent decision at this point. I find that interesting.
Yeah, I really agree, Chris. That's one of the big things that we wanted to highlight here and why we chose this as the leadoff chart, because when I look at the fact that the two grade bands that had the biggest increase and have the highest levels are pre-K and K, and then grades 9 and 12, that says to me, hey, we actually have two different problems here, because the reason that pre-K, K kids aren't going to school and the reasons that 9 to 12 kids aren't going to school, those might not actually be such similar patterns. And so we think that's an important example where by looking at the data and realizing that it's not an even pattern across all of these grade bands, now you're helping people get a better understanding of the situation. And then your reporting can also connect to that. And it lets you know, like, oh, maybe we want to zoom in on what stories can we tell about pre-K, K, what stories can we tell about high school. So that's one example here. And then we also led off this story with these key takeaways, because one thing that we find is, some people are going to look at a chart like this and they can see something pop out at them. There's going to be other people who are not as sophisticated data users, and they would really benefit from having it sort of explained to them, like, what is the data telling us? And so we presented the chart, but then we also tried to explain, what do we find when we look at the data, and citing really specific numbers to make sure that we're like giving that appropriate context and grounding in the data. And I've seen, by the way, John, you also put a comment in the chat that chronic absenteeism still has not reverted to pre-COVID. And yeah, that's another big takeaway here, and that applies across all the grade levels. And of course, we're really waiting to see, what's going to happen in some of the future reporting on attendance. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of a feel for ways that we're trying to use data to help people understand a little bit more about a situation. Oh, one thing I also want to highlight, Danielle does a really great job with this. Whenever we do a data story, we try to zoom in on one particular district or school where there's something noteworthy that we want to share. And so here, we zoomed in on a school in Lowell Public Schools where they've been using data on their own. So these are not state tools that anyone could go look up. These are dashboards that their teams created so that they could do their own analysis of patterns. And they looked at it, and you can see like across days of the week and across months of the year. And this is also a school where they have managed to get their absenteeism down to something similar to pre-COVID levels. So we wanted to highlight those success stories. And if you're thinking about how do you tell the story in your local context, you're going to be able to use the tools that we're talking about here today to zoom in on any one particular school or district so that you can have the data that's relevant to your local context. So some things to know about using the data. Anything that you find on the DESE website, that's the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, or on the E2C Hub, any of that data can be freely used and redistributed. None of it has any personal identifiable information. By the time we've published it, we've made certain that there's nothing sensitive in the data. That's our obligation. So that means you can use it with confidence that you're not going to be inadvertently putting some sort of personally identifiable information out there. But what we do try to do is we often will let you zoom in and disaggregate, meaning like break the data down into different groups of students. So you could look by gender, by race, ethnicity, certain special populations like English learners and students with disabilities. So that way you can do that kind of in-depth analysis. Because many of you are from regions that have some smaller schools and smaller districts, an important thing to know is that we do have a standard practice that if the number of students in a category is very small, then we will often hide the data for that particular group to avoid sharing data that could be closely tied to specific individuals. So, for example, if you have a small school and there are only 3 students who are Asian in 3rd grade in that school, well, we don't want to publish the average MCAS scores of a group of just 3 students, where then you'd be able to say, oh, I can kind of guess if I know this kid in 3rd grade, I kind of know their MCAS score. So that data will sometimes be hidden. And you'll especially encounter that the more you try to zoom into like one school, one grade level, one group of students. But if you start to see data missing, you usually can just come back up a level. And then you'll be able to see it at a higher level of aggregation. And we ask that when you cite the data source, you can feel free to put the link to wherever you found the data and talk about when you accessed it. But we'll also, in the data hub, we'll always explain which agency is providing the data. And so we do ask that you cite the agency that's providing the data, rather than saying that it's coming directly from the E2C Hub, even if that's how you found it. We're like the front door to help you find the data, but we didn't, we're not the owner of that data. So we do have some references here for people outside of Massachusetts, but I think we didn't have anyone outside of Massachusetts. So I'm not going to talk about this in depth, but if you have an interest, you can pursue those things as well. And now I'm going to switch over to focus on some of the things that you can actually do. I'll demo our website and bring up some of those other tools that people might find useful. So before I switch to more of a demo, just want to pause and check if people have questions or if there's something in particular that you want to see here. All right. So I'm going to start actually by bringing up profiles, because I think this is a really good place to start if you've not accessed it already. So this is a way, so, for example, if you want to look at a North Shore district, someone was mentioning Nahant earlier. So I can put in Nahant, and if I search for this, what I'm going to get here is an in-depth profile of that district. And you'll see, I think it's on another page. So you can look at students, teachers, financial data, assessment data, that means MCAS and other tests, accountability, and then we'll get into trends. That's another thing that you can look at. When you go to students, you'll also see down at the bottom here, this has breakdowns into all these different ways of looking at the data. And in a district with multiple schools, this enrollment by grade will have a list of each of the different schools here. So here there's just the one, Johnson. So if I click this, now I've gone from Nahant to zoom in even further to one particular school. I see a question in the chat. Oh, no, that's just Danielle's put the link there. So if you want to follow along. Once you're in students, there's all these different data categories here. And there's many things within each of these. So this might be a helpful way to sort of explore what's possible. Similarly with teachers, there's a lot of data here. One of the things that also might be helpful, you may not know, we have standardized teacher salary information published by district that you can use for benchmarking. This is very helpful when there are contract negotiations going on. And I believe, I'm not sure if this is totally comprehensive, but you can go here and you can usually get the latest teacher contract for a district. That's something that is collected and published. So that can be another useful thing there. You can look at finance data, and there's a few different ways to look at that. If you go to per pupil expenditures, now this is the next way that you can look at data. So what this here is, instead of looking at one particular district, these are what we call statewide reports. And this lets you look across all the districts in the state, or for some reports, you can change to other different ways of looking at it by school. And so this is, for example, the finance data. If you go to statewide reports here, you'll see that there's a lot more options. There's all these different statewide reports. And the nice thing is that they all have a standard way of using them. So for example, I'm going to go here to AP performance. This is advanced placement tests in the high school. And if I go here, now you'll start to see both some of the power of this data, but also why people sometimes have found that this data can be hard to use in this format. So this is totally comprehensive data on each district. You can even go to each school if you want, by year, going back more than 10 years, all the different subject areas of AP tests, and all the different student groups that we collect data on. Incredibly comprehensive. And then you can see how many tests did students take, how many got a score of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the percentage that, for example, get 3 to 5, that's what's considered passing. So this is incredibly comprehensive data, and this same kind of data table is available for many, many other things here. So if you want enrollment, if you want class size, if you want mobility rates, so students moving in and out of district, discipline, if there's a like one-off discipline incident in your district that's hitting headlines, maybe you want to contextualize that by showing like, are discipline incidents actually going up or down, over time. So we have data on all of those things. But here's where it can be a little tricky. So I'm jumping around a little here. Going back to AP, if you wanted to be able to say, create a chart that had a few trend lines for different subject areas across a few years, this is where it gets hard, because all subjects. So I could like choose one particular subject. So let's say I want to focus in on STEM. So I choose a calculus test and I view the report. But now you'd have to go down to your district, get these numbers, then change the report to the previous year, do it again, change it again. And if you want to do a few tests, you can see how this really becomes a lot to keep track of. That's part of what we're solving here with the Education to Career Hub. So let me start at the beginning there so that you can really see how you would find this. So from the Education to Career Research and Data Hub, and I'll get the link in the chat here. I'm sure Danielle was a second away from doing that, but here we go. So this is what you see when you first arrive. If you want, you can go to public data and you can explore data that way. If you want, you can go to our data stories, and each one of these data stories will also link you to relevant data sets for that policy narrative or that policy context. But you can also, of course, just start by searching. So here, if I wanted to get that advanced placement data, I'm going to search here for advanced placement. I want, say, performance. Hit enter. And now I can select that data set. Once you're here, this is really the complete data set. Everything that you saw on that profiles page, but all in one single data set and really set up for analysis with the kinds of tools that you might use. So if you use Excel, if you use Tableau, this is going to be a powerful way to get the data ready to use. You'll see that there's some explanation of the data. We always say last updated. You'll get some basic info like how many rows are in the data set. And then this can be quite useful. So each of the columns, of course, has a name that you'll see if you were to download the file, but we also explain what is it. And if you're going to be connecting to that data through something called an API, which is a way that you can like import this data directly into tools you're using. We also show the names for that as well. You can also just go and look at the data. And so now here's a view, and you can start to see, this is a big data set. So what's shown here is only just a preview, but there's a lot. You can already start to pick and choose just the columns you want using this column picker here. But then you can go deeper as well. So the way that we're going to go deeper, first I'm going to show you in the web tool here, and then I'll also show you how you might do that in Excel. So if you go to, so one option right away is if you want, you can export this file, and this will be the entire data set for, in this case, over 10 years, and you can use that in Excel right away. But sometimes that's more data than you actually need. So I encourage you to follow along. You can, I'll put this link in if you want to see exactly where we are. So you can try this yourself. So I'm going to go to Actions and then Query Data. And this is going to sort of launch this same data set in a more powerful tool to be able to do some analysis. So can I ask someone who's on the call, just call out the name of a district that you might be interested in, and we'll filter down to that district. You can put it in the chat or just call it out.
Manchester Essex Regional High School District.
Great. So what you can do here, and I'm going to actually pull this up a little to have a little more room to work with. You've got the data set here, and now these are filters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let me filter on district name. And so now it lets you say, do you want to have one of these? Do you want to have like any of these, anything that starts with? Usually one of is a good thing to use. And if I start typing here, Manchester, if I can type. So now let's see, or is that coming up? Manchester Essex Regional. So that comes right up. I can click this, and then I have to hit apply down here. And what has now happened is this entire data set is filtered down from what was previously millions of rows. In fact, actually, let me remove this for a second so that you can see. I'm going to remove this and apply. So here you can see this is more than 1 million rows of data, which might be a bit hard to work with. But now by filtering it down to, in this case, Manchester, as we did, once I hit apply, this is now down to only 4,000 rows of data. So this might be a point where you're ready to say, let me just export this and I can start working with this. If you're handy with Excel, that's going to be a good way to do it. There's another thing that you can also do, which is from here, you can, let me double check. Actually, we can't do what I thought from here. That's all right. So what you can do there is you can choose if you want this as like a file for Excel, or if there's another format that you want, download that, and then you can open that up and work with it. You can also shape the data a little bit more here. So maybe you don't need all of these columns. So you can turn off any columns you don't want. And again, that we try to make that fairly easy to do. And another thing that you also might want to do is to just take a close look at something up here. So for example, under subject category, if you filter this, you can now see all the different categories of AP tests, and this will show you what's in there. Or if you were to filter by student group, by looking at student group, oh, hang on. You can see the different groups of students that are available. So we have, you could look at all students, students with disabilities, male, female, African-American, so looking by race, low income, not low income, and you can do all of those kinds of analysis using this data. So I'm not going to apply any of those additional filters. I'm just going to export this data, get it in this format and download, and then I'll show you what we can do next. Oh, and someone asked, can you put more than one district in at once? Absolutely. So I'm just going to guess, but like, let's say I wanted Ipswich as well. Oops, can I type here? There we go. So yes, you can add additional districts. You can just keep adding them in here. Or if you don't want to worry about typing them all in, you also could have just downloaded the whole data set in the first place when it was the whole million row thing, and then you could just filter it in the tool that you're using. Another way that you might also want to filter it to just sort of make the data size a little smaller is you also might want to go to year. So SY is school year, and maybe say if it's greater than 2018, you know, maybe you don't really need to go back 15 years of data, and it's enough just to have 2018 and beyond. And then you can use that to filter the data down further. But in any case, so now I've downloaded this data. I'm going to open this up here. I'll bring that over in just a second once that opens. So now I get a data set that looks like this. And you'll see a few things that are useful to notice here. Again, like all of these column names might seem a little hard to read at first, but you can always go back to when we were here. We provide that guide to what each different column name is, so you can follow that along here. I'm not going to go through like how you actually conduct analysis in Excel. That's not this training. There's lots of other ways that you can do that. But I do want to just point out one thing to really watch out for. Because we've put all the data for these things into the same file, you can see, for example, that we're breaking down students into these different groups. We're breaking down the subjects into these different categories and so on. What that means is that you do have to be a little careful that you're not double counting, because this all students number is also the same as if you were to add up the numbers for these different categories. And you need to make sure that you're appropriately looking at like one district at a time or one group of students at a time. Otherwise, if you just do your totals right away, like if I just did the total of this column, you might end up with data being double counted. A good way that you can be careful about that is, remember I was showing you earlier that all that data is available already and our published profiles here. So you can always just cross-reference back to here and see if you're getting the same numbers. But this way, you don't have to go through the process of downloading them one by one. This is a good way, though, to make sure that your numbers match up with what's officially published. So I think that's most of what I wanted to show for how you find data in the Education to Career Research and Data Hub. What I'm going to offer here with the remainder of the time is if people have specific kinds of data that they're looking for, we can show you how you might find that data. And I also do want to share one particular thing that might be useful, which is that in an effort to make it easier to find where different data are located, this right here is just a directory that we try to keep up to date that lists out in different categories where you might find the data that you're seeking, in case you don't find it or you don't know exactly what to search for in the data hub. And this is also a good way to just sort of browse through this and learn about the wide range of things that exist. Sometimes you don't know what to search for because you didn't even know it existed in the first place. And this is a good way to just sort of browse and learn about those things. And you can see there's stuff on specific topics here. So, you know, special programs, if you want to look at English learners or charter schools, there's all sorts of things that let you get deep into those specific topics. So I think Danielle has, again, put that link out there for you. And at this point, I'll see we've got about 15 minutes left, and we can take this in a direction that's most helpful for all of you. So does anyone have a specific thing they want to learn more about? Or a kind of data they're looking for?
I have a question.
Please.
So this could be used like, so say you were a union representative for the teachers and you wanted to look at contracts that other, I saw contracts on there that other school districts have. Does it have that information in there as well?
Yeah, and I've actually seen that like in my local district, and I know Danielle has talked about seeing that as well, that sometimes like parents or teachers unions that want to advocate about, you know, what's the appropriate salary level for a teacher. You can get the averages from that data set that we publish, and you can also look at contracts for your district and neighboring or comparable districts to even see like the details of the steps and lanes and things like that.
I have a quick question. Is part of this session going to go into, I'm wondering if you could maybe give a quick example of exporting something to your visualization tools?
Oh, sure.
If you wanted to do it as opposed to looking at your visualization.
Yeah, so we'll use that same AP data set. So there's an option right here under visualize to create visualization. This is what you're asking about, right?
Exactly, thank you.
Yep. So one thing you can do is you can just create your own account if you want to be able to like save something and come back to it, but you don't need that. So this is going to require some familiarity with like, what are you trying to do with the data visualization? So for example, dimension, this is going to be like, what do you want to graph it against? So let's say I want to do like school year. So now it's put the school years here. In this case, it's actually going in the opposite order that I want. So I'll have to remind myself actually how to reorder those. I'll find that in a second. And then for the measure, that's like how tall do you want the bars to be? Maybe I'll use like the percentage that's scoring a 3 or a 5. But now this is something where you really do have to be careful, because what you'll see right away is like these bars are adding up to 2 million%. And the reason is that's because this is adding together the percentages from every different test, every different district, every different student group. So this is where you're going to have to be a little thoughtful about how you want to filter those things down. And so I think we're going to want to do that. Oh no, sorry, from over here. So now we can add filters. You can say, I want to choose a specific district, and I want to choose a specific subject, and I want to choose a specific student group. Now you're going to start to get something more meaningful. So for example, if I go, like I can do Manchester again here. So now I've selected a district. And let's say I want to choose all subjects and all students. So even if you wanted all students, it's important that you select this, because otherwise it's going to be adding up all these different ones. But if you choose all students, it will just take the number from that one. And we are still not quite filtered down enough yet. Let me just double check real quick. I think we might also need, let's see if this gets us there. Yeah, so now we're getting to somewhere meaningful. But what we also need to do is make sure that this is sorting correctly. So I think for that, we want to go to chart sorting and probably ascending by label. So there we go. So now we're at something where we're really starting to look at the real data. So what you've got here now is the percentage of students who are passing the test in Manchester Essex Regional and going year by year. And you can see there's some ups and downs along the way. And what that also will let you do if you want, you can switch it to like a line chart. And I believe if you wanted to compare a few student groups like this, if I apply this, I think we'll get, no, so those are combined. I'm trying to remember, how do we do that? I think we go here, and I think if you group by student group, now you can get the different lines. So now this is letting you start to see for all students versus female versus male, what's the passing rate on these different tests. So as I was mentioning earlier, like any data and data visualization tool, there's a bit of a learning curve. And sometimes you can see I'm still remembering exactly where to find things. But the key thing that I would really say to make sure of is to double check that the numbers that you're getting are reasonable, and even double check them against the published data for your district to make sure that you haven't double counted something. But if you are selecting one district and you're choosing your subject area, we could also do like biology instead. And then you can choose which students you want to see and so on. You start to get down to some numbers. You can see actually something's still not right here because these numbers are above 100%. So I will see if we can figure out why that's still happening. Oh, that's because we have two subjects selected, sorry. There we go. And now we have numbers that are looking good again because they're below 100%. Does that help address the question that you were asking?
Yeah, it was very helpful. Thank you.
And then I think that once you save this, if you're signed in, then there's also possibilities to be able to share this and use this. And you can also do some like customizing text. So you could type here like AP Bio test results, male versus female versus all students. So you can do things like that, and then it adds it onto the chart just like that. Any other questions or things that would be helpful to see? You can change your colors.
Sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
Beside the linter, I just wanted to know if we can do the same results but in a map way, like shown in map.
I think that's this here.
We were guessing the same thing.
Yeah, and then let me see though, because so I think this may not work automatically, and this is something we might need to work on. So we do have district name, but that district name is just a text field that just lists out the name of the district. And I think that in order for the map to work, we would need to be including a column in here that's like the geographic location assigned to each district, like the boundaries. And there's certain like automatic ways, like there's some standards for how that works. We've used that sometimes for some stuff that we've done internally. That's a really interesting question and something that we can consider, like to add that data into some of our published data sets. We'll have to take that back.
It also may be a function of the fact that it's a single district we're looking at. Perhaps when you have multiple districts, it gives a map as an option, or you can look in a different way.
I see what you're saying, but even if I remove that filter, the issue is, I think also that, as I said, it doesn't have a way to automatically know that like Manchester Essex Regional has a particular location. There needs to be a field, like a column in the data set that tells what the location is, and that's something we'd have to start to do on our end. But I'm glad you asked about that. That gives us something to think about. Danielle has put a link in the chat, also just a getting started guide. There's a lot of powerful tools here. One thing I should also point out is that this whole platform is not a platform that we created. It's something we purchased. So you see that this is also used by other data programs, like the CDC uses this, other states and jurisdictions use this. So there's also some good resources out there just in general to learn how to use these tools. We try to link to some of the ones that we think are most useful in that getting started page. Any other questions before we wrap up? We've got a few minutes left. Oh, that's not what we want. Oh, one thing I should point out is that the district field also does have state as an I. Oh, it does. Here we do have state as an option. So that would let you also add in the state line if you want to compare. So these are now state numbers for male, female, etc. And again, we have to reorder that access. All right, well, I think we'll wrap it up here. Hopefully, people have gotten some ideas about what they might want to do with data. And I should probably just wrap up by pointing to our points of contact. So if you have any questions about working with data, you can get in touch with us here. And for any media contact or questions, we've listed for the different agencies here. Thank you so much for coming and for your engagement and questions.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sam. This is, it's like you said, it's a lot of powerful data in here. And if anybody has ideas on more specific areas that they'd like to look into, just let me know, send me a note, and we can talk to Sam and Danielle about perhaps putting together a training opportunity for that. They will be also presenting another session for us in August about how to use recent MCAS data in your local coverage. So we don't have the exact date for that yet, but we will be having that in August. Like I said, if there's more ideas, something that you want to see a little closer, or another area that you think might be helpful, just let me know, and we'll be in touch with Sam and Danielle and see if they can provide that for us too.
Well, thanks again, everyone.
Thanks so much, Sam. Thanks, Danielle. We really appreciate it.